I hope my screen is visible. So I take this opportunity to basically launch MigrantWatch 2021-22. Most of the common migrants start coming to Sri Lanka. This bird, the blue-tailed bee-eater, is iconic to most of us because it's a common migrant that can be seen around our houses, around our garden, and sometimes even coming to our garden itself. So it's a bird that usually announces the onset of migration for most of us. But there are other birds also being recorded from different parts of Sri Lanka. So we launched. This is the logo of MigrantWatch, which features an Indian pitta. I'll explain why it has been used. Some of you might know this, but because there are some newcomers as well, so I'll explain that. And the logo on the right side is the Welcome to the Birds. That's the BirdLife Asia's initiative to promote bird migration in this region. So why we start MigrantWatch? So nearly 40% of total bird species that are recorded in Sri Lanka are migratory. And it's an easy way to promote bird watching and then bird conservation through that, because some of the migrants are very common, even we can find it, but a lot of people do not know. So this is an opportunity to migrant birds are opportunity to raise interest on nature. So these are the objectives of MigrantWatch: raise awareness and promote observation of migratory birds, as I mentioned, provide guidance for public to help exhausted migrants, especially during the month of October. We get number of Indian pittas, especially Indian pittas, get recorded exhausted. They fly continuously, and then at the point of entry they get sometimes disoriented, exhausted, and found in home gardens. But many do not know what to do. So raise awareness on this. Keep reminding how to help these exhausted birds. It's one of the main objective of the MigrantWatch. And then, of course, the gather data. So it's important that we have this kind of data, because sometimes the migratory bird that were very common in your area are absent now, absent this season, or their numbers are have diminished. So this could be a pattern that is ongoing. It could be not. It could be a pattern, a trend, not only on your area, but across Sri Lanka. So these numbers can tell these kind of stories. Numbers can highlight this kind of trends, which can then even scientists use to take action. Scientists and conservationists, and especially the habitats, promote the habitat conservation as well. So ultimately, MigrantWatch is a citizen science project. We use eBird to record these numbers. So why Indian pitta as our logo? So that's what I explained. We got a lot of Indian pittas recorded, found exhausted in this period of time. So these are some of the past records we got. So because of that, to mainly to promote the objectives or achieve the objectives I mentioned, we launched MigrantWatch in 2011. This is the fly of the first MigrantWatch program and the launch. And then we had a lot of field events as well initially, but field events we cannot do this period of time because of COVID lockdown, but still we can watch migrants around us. So these are some of the initial activities of MigrantWatch. And kids, we try to promote bird watching for kids through MigrantWatch. Yeah. So one may have the question, we have to watch migratory birds. Should we have to go to these kind of places? But what to do if at this period of time, especially during the new normal, where we are asked to restrict our travel, and of course there's a lockdown going on. So we have to watch migrant birds. We can't we watch? So, but some special migrants are recorded even in your garden. So this is one of some of the birds that getting recorded here. So this is in the heart of Colombo, the Mrigasaya. Malanite, and then still more records from the heart of Colombo itself. And these are some of the common migrants: the Asian paradise flycatcher, or the Suduradimara, or Rahan Mara, and then the brown flycatcher. Then I explained that these are the blue-tailed bee-eater, Nilpenda Ninguhara, and brown shrike, forest wagtail, barn swallows. Barn swallows is another iconic bird because they used to perch on large numbers on some cities like Ratnapura, Matugama. So they are also considered as an ambassador to promote migration because their large congregations attract people's attention. So how can you contribute? How can you record these sightings of migrants? We promote eBirds. It's an electronic platform that you can enter data. So doing it is very simple. You can use it on the phone as an app, or also you can log into ebird.org on the site, and then it's very simple to enter the data. You have to enter the location. You can even find it on a map if you want. And then the rest is basically self-explanatory when you start using the app. So just select the birds. You can also put the indicate or enter the number of birds that you had seen over the period of time of your observations. So, and you can also share this with this email. So these all your observations will come to. We can analyze it after the period. So that's some of the basics on MigrantWatch, or what I have to tell about MigrantWatch. But what to do if you find a new bird? Now we have another tool, that's Merlin. You can also use Merlin to identify if you found a bird that you do not know. You can. There are different ways to use Merlin. Either you can if you have the chance, you can take a photograph and then upload it into the Merlin app, and Merlin app will give you a set of suggestions. So then you can review those suggestions. You can check the sample images Merlin suggests and check whether that's a bird that you had seen. And if you could not take a photo, if you don't have a camera, and then still you can try to identify the bird through series of questions. The Merlin will ask the size of the bird, the colors of the bird that you could recognize, and what was the bird doing? Was it feeding on a feeder? Was it on a water habitat? Was it on ground, bushes? So after these kind of series of questions, the Merlin app will give you some suggestions. The Merlin app also gives something that you do not get on field guide. Still, the field guide is the best in terms of identifying the birds. You can take it to the field, and the value of the field guides, the published field guides, will not diminish. But there are more additions, more advantages of using an app like Merlin, where you can also have the bird songs. Many of the common birds of Sri Lanka have their songs are included in the Merlin app, so you can also listen to those songs if you are lucky to listen to the song. Perhaps you could hear only the song, not the bird. Particularly in Indian Pita, they are called as 6 o'clock birds. So they singing on in the morning around 6, and also at the evening around 6. So this is what I explained. You can also upload just a photo to so the app, through its artificial intelligence algorithms, will select the bird. But though it looks complex, but it's not complex. Just download this Merlin app to your phone, and then you have to select a special pack for Sri Lanka. This has been launched recently through an event with Focusel. So we encourage you to use this as much as possible. So it's interesting. You just Google it, and you can. There are a lot of videos that would guide you to use Merlin and eBay. Right. Okay. So that's all what I have to tell about the MigrantWatch, and how should you enter data, and in case you find a bird that is not known to you, then how to use Merlin app to identify. Okay, I'll hand over to Professor Kotagama to continue. Yeah, Professor, over to you.
Right. So thank you very much, Malaka, for that introduction on the MigrantWatch, which basically we are 2 months behind anyway. We normally do this at end of August, early September, end of August, so it's 1 month behind. So it doesn't matter because of the current situation. We have to adjust ourselves a little bit. So good morning to all of you. Outside my window, it is not that very pleasant. It's been raining in the morning, very gloomy. Yet I think for birders, sometimes the gloomy mornings are better sometimes than the bright mornings. So we make use of the best nature that we have and try to enjoy what is around us. Right, now that you have an idea of why we are launching the MigrantWatch, and of course next month there is the big day for migration, 8th and 9th, I believe, which is a international event across the world for migrants, and we may have some events on those 2 days also. Malaka will let you all know accordingly. My task today, as has been in the past, is to clarify the ideas of migration, put you in perspective of where we know our knowledge lies with migration. However, I will hold back the new information that has come about through the research activities and our FOGSL initiative of radio tagging. Gayamuni Panagoda and Dr. Sampath or Professor Sampath has been involved in this with courtesy of Ms. Jnanam and a lot of other sponsors who helped us through the process with work from MANA. So that I will leave for Professor Sampath to explain and tell us where we are in terms of that. That information is groundbreaking today to us, and some of the many ideas that has been brought to the table by good bird watchers, naturalists like Colonel Phillips and people like that are now bringing light into us, and some ideas may have to be changed, but we are getting a consensus point of understanding much better scientifically so that we can achieve better conservation of the birds for the future. So with that, let me share my slides with you all. I'm going to go into share slides. Can I ask whether you can see this slide?
We can.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So today our main event is launching the MigrantWatch, and within it, I take the honor of being able to present, as was done in the many last years, bird migration in Sri Lanka. A very brief idea. We won't go into technical details, but of course, if you have any questions, please do ask at the end. I will try my best to clarify it for you. What is migration? And this is where sometimes we need to clarify ourselves, because to me, I think it is somewhat a weakness of the English language, because common language of the people did not go beyond into the technical needs of the language to express differences that you see in certain activities with respect to different maybe organisms or functions, behaviors, and so on. You will see what I mean as we go along. Now, I have two pictures here, which are, if you go into the text, would say that it is something to do with migration. We have our migrant friends and relatives in Australia. I'm sure some of us know how our colleagues and our neighbors who were around us in the past suddenly decided to go off to Australia, and some migrate to Canada, some migrate to USA, Europe, and all these places. Now, they have migrated, but is that what we are talking about with respect to birds? We will see that it is not. So some same word used with different context. So unless you are referring to it with the context, sometimes it becomes lost. So as a birder and bird watcher and ornithologist, maybe when we talk about the migration of the bird, you understand that you're talking of something very special and not the same thing that your colleague or your neighbor has migrated to Australia. So that has one word which is giving two extremely different ideas. Now, that's why I say that is a problem of the language. I can give you some real fancy words that can mean contrastingly different feelings also. But you see, in the Eastern languages, these things have been very carefully sorted out and identified. What we want to say is sometimes very much what we have felt about it. And we find that the birds of the Eastern languages, Pali, Sanskrit, Sinhala, or for that matter, Japanese, or even languages from Malay, Malayalam, all of these seems to have that element in it. And the words are a lot to do with what is exact in terms of what is being felt. And we will come to that as we go along, because on the second hand, so on the second side of it, it must be realized that some of the words that we have today have come to us only because we understood it through the English language, because the science evolved much faster than in the East, in the West, and it got decimated. It was spread out across the world through English. And so we have the new words mostly coming out of English. And then we have to ask ourselves whether we understand that. And if so, yes, there's a sound, Malaka. Is it disturbing? Okay.
Can all mute their mics? So
yeah, I can see that Malin has not muted his mic. Marika?
right now.
Okay. Sorry for that interruption, because these things can happen in technology. So I say the technology is what you don't get when you want it, right? So this is one of the situations. Every time it happens. So that's why I always say technology is what you don't get when you want it. So you want a very perfect thing, it never works. But of course, technology is our future. Anyway, so the words have these very interesting connotations. We learn in English. I would say that 99% of us learn in English wherever we have the opportunity. Of course, we know that in Sri Lanka, it may be the other way around. 99% of the children of today are learning in Sinhala or Tamil, and then English becomes a subsequent addition to it. But even then, the technical details of many languages have sort of evolved in the West, and the English is the one that spreads it, at least to us. Not that French can't do it, the Russians don't do it, and Chinese don't do it in Chinese, and so on and so forth. And then we have to understand the meaning of that word. Here is a very classic word like that. When we say migration in English, it has so many different real world explanations. And if you don't discriminate between these real world explanations, you would not be seeing the real picture of the meaning of that word migration used with respect to words. So my task here is to try and clarify that for you. We have other words like colonization, where those who don't realize will say, well, the birds have migrated into this country. It is not that. The birds are spreading and making a living in different parts. The cattle egret, the rose-ring parakeet are some of these birds in the recent times that have colonized new lands. There have been many birds in the past which have done this, but I'm taking some just for the moment to clear the words. We have migration of butterflies. More than 300 million butterflies are said to migrate in the United States of America. In Sri Lanka, we have heard so much about the Samanala Kandata Yanam Samanalayo, right? And we know that they go in this unidirectional. We say that they go to the Sri Pada and then they die at the end of the day. And much of it is very much because their life is only about 14 days or 15 days plus. And they fly in that direction very much. Today we say, because we understand the science of why they go, is because of the wind direction that they move in that northward direction. And of course, we interpreted it as coming to the Sri Pada. But it was a unidirectional. So the unidirectional movement for these butterflies, may Samanalanta make America monarch, ape Danny Day kiena, palm butterfly ටිකක් සමාන ලක්ෂණ තියෙනවා. විශාල ගානක්. නිකන් හිතන්න මිලියන 300ක් විතර. එක දිශාවකට ගමන් කරලා එතනින් ඒගොල්ලෝ නැති වෙලා යනවා. ආපහු යමක් නැහැ. There is no question of coming back. It's just like our butterflies in Sri Lanka. So the monarch, you can see huge numbers like this can be moving. Then even among the invertebrate groups of the spiny lobsters, Pokirisan Natara, me they දැකලා තියෙනවා. එක දිශාවකට ගැඹුරු මුහුදේ සිට එනවා ගල් පරදයාවට. They come towards the rocks or the sandstone reefs, primarily because of the breeding, right? And then they most of the ones die, but some may go back. You have all heard of the salmon migration, I'm sure. Salmon මාළුවාගේ මේ වචනේ දැන් මම සිංහලෙන් මුල් වතාවට කියනවා නිහැරීම නැත්නම් පර්යටනය. කලින් අපිට තිබුණේ සංචරණය කියන වචනේ. දැන් ඒකයි කිව්වේ සිංහලෙන් හරියට අපිට අදහස තේරෙනකොට අපි මේ වචනය අලුත් කරනවා. අලුත් කරලා හරි අදහසක් ගන්න. සංචාරකයෙක් කියන්නේ in සිංහල සංචාරකයා can meet even a tourist also. ඒ කියන්නේ රටට ඇවිල්ලා යන මේ පිටරට මිනිහෙක් උත් සංචරණය. ඉතින් සංචරණ කුරුල්ලන් කියන අදහස අපි ගත්තේ ඇවිල්ලා යන නිසා, because they come and go like tourists. That is how the Sinhala word originally came. But there are a lot of differences between a tourist coming to Sri Lanka and going away, with a bird coming to Sri Lanka and flying back to its motherland. So that's why we had to slowly change the word. The original word that came after Sancharaka Kurullo was Paryatane, which was coined by me with Mr. D.G.A. Pereira. And we found that gradually even that was not really capturing the situation, behavior of the bird. Kurullage suviseshi හැසිරීම සහ ක්‍රියාවලිය පූර්ණ ලෙස වචනයේ ගැබ් නොවනකොට භාෂාවේ එක කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් අපි කරනවා. අපිට තේරුණා පර්යටනය කියන වචනේ ප්‍රමාණවත් නැහැ. ඒ නිසා අපි නිහැරියා කියන එක අලුතෙන් හඳුන්වලා දුන්නා සිරිලක කුරුල්ලෝ කියන පොත 1998 ප්‍රකාශ කෙරුවාට පස්සේ. නියරක් හැර යනවා. ඒක මේ කරනකොට you can see that it's very much understood. Near means an area in which they come and stay, and then they leave that and go, and all the rest of it is that, whether it is from the north to the south or south to the north. Anyway, salmon is another fish which is well known to migrate, according to the language, from the sea into the freshwater streams and rivers of Canada and other places. And they come to the very, very specific river in which they were born and developed. Because these fish go up the river, and right at the top, they will lay the eggs and breed, and the young will start growing up and slowly moving down into the sea to grow to become the bigger adult. ලොකු එකා වෙන්න යන්නේ. ඉතින් මේ ක්‍රියාවලිය තුළ ඔයාගෙන තියෙනවා මේ හැදෙන හැටව මහ මුහුදේ තමයි විශාල වෙන්නේ. It becomes big in the sea. නැවත විතර දැමීමට සුවැඳීමට ගමන් කරනකොට උපන් දිය පාරටම නැත්නම් ගඟටම දිය ඇලටම යනවායි කියලා පෙන්නලා තියෙනවා. So it's a very, very specific way of happening. බොහොම සුවිශේෂී හැකියාවක් මේ මත්ස්‍යයින්ට මේ නිසා තියෙනවා. සමහර හැම නෙවෙයි, what's the green turtles ඇස්බෑවන් අතර, බ්‍රසීලයත් Ascension Islands අතරත් සංචරණය කරනවා කියන එක නැත්නම් නිහැරීමක් මම පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ සංචරණය කියන වචනේ මෙතනට නිහැරීම කියන කුරුල්ලන්ට තියාගෙන සංචරණය කරනවා කියලා පෙන්눔 කරලා තියෙනවා. මේකේ දිශානතියක් ගැන නැහැ. බ්‍රසීලයේ සටහන් කරපු අය Ascension දූපතේ ගිහිල්ලා විතර දාලා තියෙනවා. Ascension දූපතේ සටහන් කරපු සොම්බුල් සතුන් බ්‍රසීලයට ගිහිල්ලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මේ දීප දෙක අතර between these two lands of Brazil and the Ascension Islands, they have been known to move, and this is also called migration. Then I think again, many of you all may have heard of the huge, unbelievable spectacle of wildebeest migration in Africa. They move from one area in large numbers to another area, which is triggered very much on the vegetational changes resulting from the climate or weather patterns. So they come from these areas and come down into the Serengeti, feed during the wet season in these areas, and then go back again through the transitional areas of the northern parts of Serengeti to the Masai Game Reserve. And this is sometimes, as this picture shows you, may pintura pennana wage maha visala sankhyawa මේකම නරඹීම සඳහා අප්‍රිකාවට යන පුද්ගලයන් ඉන්නවා. මොකද ඒක දැකීමටම සුවිශේෂී වූ ලක්ෂණයක්. But එතකොට මේකේ you can see they are going like a circle. නිකන් රවුමට යනවා වගේ පේන්නේ. මේක අපි හිතේ තියාගමු. But this is also referred to as migration. Then when we go further, මහමුහුදේ තල්මස්සු විවිධ කාලවලදී at different times and different seasons are known to move from one area to another area. So the grey whale is supposed to move along the eastern coast of or western coast of America, from the area of Bering Sea or the Gulf of Alaska all the way down towards California in that region. Now, we have whales in our country, waters, අපේ මුහුදේ තල්මස්සු ඉන්නවා. දැනට අපි දන්න බොහොම මූලික දැනුම අනුව මේ තල්මස්සු මෝසම් ඍතු වෙනස් වීමත් සමග බස්නාහිර නැගෙනහිර මුහුදු දෙක අතරේ තරමක් දුරට සංචරණය කරනවා කියලා අපි දන්නවා. ඉතින් එවැනි සංචරණයන් නිහරි ක්‍රියාවලියන්ද කියන එක තමයි අපිට තහවුරු කරගන්න බැරිව තියෙන්නේ මේවා තමයි. ඒවා හැම ජීවියෙක්ගම වගේ සිදුවෙන බවක් දැන් පිළිගන්න ඕන. එතකොට මේ වගේ විවිධ තල්මස්සුන්ගෙත් එක වෙනවා. නෑ ශිරපායින්ගේ our relative mammals also this happens. In Mexico, South America, bats are known to migrate. They move from areas down in the horn of South America, in the Mexican area, while they pollinate the cacti, which of course is a very, very interesting fruit. When it is pollinated by the bats, the fruit is used for the most special drink in that area, tikla. So they have a lot of features and commonness for this cacti. But this cactus to fruit needs the bat. A cactus වල පළතුරු එන්න එකෙන් පානයක් සකස් කරනවා. ඊටාම සුවිශේෂී වූ පානයක් තික්ලා කියලා ඒ පැත්තේ පාවිච්චි කරන එක. දැන් මේ පානය හදන්න පළතුරු ගෙඩිය හැදෙන්න ගෙඩිය පරාගණය කරන්න වවුල අවශ්‍යයි. If the bat is not there, the pollination doesn't happen, then the fruit doesn't come out, and then you don't have your product. So you can see how significant the role of the bat is for the culture. And that is also because of migration. And in the midst of all of this knowledge, we know that there is one bird that is supposedly does a long distance migration. This is the Arctic tern, which goes all the way from the North Americas down to the Arctic and then comes back all the way down and goes back. Huge, more than 40,000 kilometers. A well-known thing in the words of migration of birds. So from that basic introduction, which I tried to explain to you, that migration in English is used for multiplicities of animal movements. There are examples of insects, like not just only the butterfly, but there are water insects that are known to move like this, and so on. There are many. On land also, there are ants, like the army ant movements or things like that are also called migrations. The lemming movement at times in the Nordic countries are sometimes referred to as migrations. So there's a multitude of actions or activities. Bahutara kriyawaliyan samuhayakata සංචරණය කියන වචනය මිනිස්සුත් එක්ක වදින්චයට යන අයටත් ඇවිල්ලා යන අයටත් මේ ඔක්කොටම මයිග්‍රේෂන් කියන වචනේ ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් යෙදීමක් තියෙනවා. දැන් අපි සිංහලෙන් මේක පොඩ්ඩක් විසඳා ගන්න පැටලුම් හරලා ගන්න උත්සාහයක් දරලා තියෙනවා. එහෙම තමයි අපි භාෂාවෙන් වර්ධනයට විෂය වර්ධනයටත් එක්ක කරන්නේ. හරි මේ නිහැරීම දැන් සිංහලෙන් අපි මේකට දැන් පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ නිහැරීම කියන වචනය. හරියටනේ නෙවෙයි. මේ නිහැරි ක්‍රියාවලිය සිදු වෙන්නේ නැත්නම් එහි ලක්ෂණ මොනවාද? අපි බලමු. එකක් තමයි නිහැරි ක්‍රියාවලිය ඇති වෙන්නේ the migration happens primarily because of some seasonal change. A weather change. දේශගුණයේ යම්කිසි වෙනසක් නිසා තමයි මේක වෙන්නේ. අද අපි දන්න හැටියට මේ දේශගුණික වෙනස්කම මූලිකම වශයෙන් අපි මෙතන දැනට තේරුම් ගන්නට උත්සාහ කරමු. To understand, let's keep it to that primary purpose. Is because of the rotation of the earth. ලෝකේ භ්‍රමණය වෙනවා, ඒ වගේම දෝලණය වෙනවා. මේ වගේ හේතුන් එක්ක අපිට විවිධ ඍතු ලැබෙනවා. We have different seasons, the spring, summer, winter, autumn, and we know that the spring is nice and good and the winter is bad. Some of us have had the experience. අපේ සමහර අයට ඒකේ අත්දැකීම තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. බහුතරයකට මේ අන්ත දෙකේ අත්දැකීම නොතේන්න පුළුවන්. නමුත් අපිට පින්තූර වලින් from pictures and of all the literature කතනෙන් අහරෙන් මෙහෙන් මේ දෙක අන්ත දෙකක් හැටියට we recognize. During the winter everything just goes out of focus like thing. Nothing is there. There are no leaves, no insects. All that freezes up. The water freezes up, and so it's not at all පොඩ්ඩක්වත් හොඳ තැනක් නෙවෙයි යහතින් ජීවත් වෙන්න. So එතකොට අපිත් සාමාන්‍යය වගේ if you don't have a good place to live in content with being happy, you will try to move somewhere else. Like some people who migrate to Australia thinking that this pleasant country is not good enough for them. What to do? That can happen. So from spring, summer, this is one of the reasons. Ehemanan, migration happens because of seasonal changes. Now, that is the general thing that I am putting. Seasonal changes need not necessarily be these drastic weather changes. It can also be subtly rainfall pattern changes also. So you have them moving between two specific locations. සුවිශේෂ ස්ථාන දෙකක් අතර තමයි මේ ක්‍රියාවලිය සිදු වෙන්නේ කියන එක තමයි දෙවෙනි සුවිශේෂී ලක්ෂණය. The second most important feature in migration, especially in birds, is that first it was a seasonal response. Second is it between two specific locations. මේ සුවිශේෂී ස්ථාන දෙකේ එකක it is in one place that the birds are breeding. සුවඳීම සිදු වෙන එක තැනක අනිත් තැන they only feed. ඇවිල්ලා කනවා විතරයි. So between the feeding area and the breeding area is this movement. මේ ක්‍රියාවලිය තියෙන්නේ මේ වගේ සුවිශේෂී කලාප දෙකක් අතර. So දෙවෙනි ලක්ෂණය specific location. තුන්වෙනි ලක්ෂණය මේ ගමන this travel is bi-directional in most cases, not in all cases. Why I say in most cases and not in all cases, like the Arctic tern, it can be what is called a circular movement, going like that. Now, it came on this path, it doesn't have to go back on that path. It can go back on a different path, but it goes back to that specific location. And gamana ආපු මගම ආපහු යන්න අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. නමුත් යන්නේ එම ස්ථානයටයි. දැන් කොහොම සරල උදාහරණයක් ගමුකෝ. If you travel from Kandy to Colombo, you can travel from Kandy to Colombo on the normal Kandy-Colombo road. But you can get back to Kandy through Kurunagala. You can go to Diulapitiya or go to Katunayaka, go to Diulapitiya. That way get to Kurunagala, and from there you can get to Kandy. So that is a different route. Venama paraking may be. But Gie Kotandada in Kandy to a very specific location. So the specificity of the location, Sthane Nishchitaya, is very important for bird migration. It is bidirectional. That is the third feature. So you have season, specificity of location, and now you have a bidirectional movement. The fourth one is that these bidirectional movements have brought to us very, very broad routes. Ita pulul atha ati pradesha handunagana tiyena me gamana nisa, me gaman nisa. So these are referred to as flyways. මේවට කියන්නේ flyways කියලා. පියාසර මං කියලා කියන්න පුළුවන්. So you have here right the East Asian flyway. එතකොට අග්නි ආසියා ගමන් මාර්ගය මේ පළාත. Then you have අපි ඉන්නේ Central Asian flyway නැත්නම් Indo-Asian flyway. Today we call it Central Asian flyway. මධ්‍යස්ථ ආසියානු Yasara Monkey and we call it the Central Asian flyway today. So it feeds from all of this, actually, not just only in this small area, but it feeds quite large area all the way from the north and down into Sri Lanka. And that. So because of this, we are very, very critical in the flyway. We are the end point. Apitamai avasana sthane me Central Asian flyway ke dakune. So like that, you have other flyways, Indo-Pacific and things like that. Ilanga Lakshanaya is genetic. So now we had, of course, the first one. Now before I forget, we start by saying that seasonal, specific area, directional or and then we said that Nishchita Marga Hadenoa Yanua Akpahata Kiano may Kriyavali. This activity that is being shown by the bird is very strongly said to be genetically determined. Preveni Nathan Jana Visin Tindu Enawai Kieneka Sandhan Karano. Then make a Terum Kran. How do we explain this? When we say something is genetically inbred into the species and happens according to genetic message, it means that the triggers, if present, avashya yomuan thienamanam kriyavaliya venawamai. You can't prevent it. If you try to prevent it, it will actually result in the bird disorienting itself or killing itself at the end of the day. So a migrant bird has to migrate. In other words, that is it. So that's why we call it genetically ingrained. Jana Anuwa Eka Badda Vela Tiyenne, Bandila Tiyenne. There are examples, however, sometimes where this has subtly changed. There have been populations that have not adhered to this genetic model. We will see some of them as we go along. Or maybe I will mention it here. Now, Malaka mentioned about the blue-tailed bee-eater. Now, that's an example of where we consider it as a migrant, but today we are almost like 99% confirmed that there is a breeding population in the east, in the Panama area. Panama area, Kumana Panama Pradesh Tula, Suandena, Ghaneak, sitting about Api, 99%ක්ම වගේ ස්ථිරයි අපිට. එහෙමනම් මෙච්චර කාලයක් තිස්සේ ප්‍රවේණී හේතු නිසා නැත්නම් ප්‍රවේණී සංවේදීතාවය නිසා නිහැරුණු කුරුල්ලෝ කොහොමද වෙනස් වුනේ? How did these birds that were migrating all these years change this genetic feature? We know the reasons how it can be and all that, but I'm not going to keep you on that now. So at the end of the day, this is what bird migration means. Kurulu nihariya kiyanne menna me lakshana gonuwa, the collective features of these must be there in the migration of birds. That is why bird migration in many ways are different from mammal migration, from insect migration, from bat migration, and so on and so forth. It's a very specific type of activity shown by the group of vertebrates called birds. Make a site tiyagana api balamu tikkak quickly. I am not going to go more into detail because time is catching up very fast. How did this evolve? There are two theories, very simple. One is called the northern home theory, meaning that the birds evolved in the north, but you know there was these glacial periods when the north became extremely cold and the ice cap formed. So the birds got pushed down towards the tropics. And then of course we know the ice melted again and you have the interglacial periods and we come back to like what is today. Eva venokota kurullo tika ආපහු උඩට ගියා. ඉතින් මේගොල්ලෝ කියන්නේ කුරුල්ලන්ගේ සම්භවය, the origin of the birds is in the north. ඒ නිසා උතුර තමයි ඒගොල්ලෝගේ ගෙදර. So the north is their home. But because of the glacial changes, they got pushed to the tropics and they went back to the north. ඉතින් මේ ගමන නැත්නම් this change of activity ingrained into the birds. And then they realized after there are more reasons which we'll come to later. Other one, of course, is a subtly different one, which says the southern ancestral home. Earlier one was northern ancestral home. This is a southern ancestral home, meaning that the birds evolved in the south. There were no climate changes or drastic weather changes that was required, but the populations became larger and larger and larger. And then some found that it is easier to move away from where you are because the competition was increasing. So they sought new homes and found a new home up in the north or in the down south. Unfortunately, this new home gets cold and cannot live, so they come back. So that is also the new theory, the theory. That's called the southern ancestry. The birds evolved here, numbers increased, they sought new houses and went up or down, but unfortunately the temperature comes down and it becomes very cold up there, and then therefore they were forced to come back, or they were looking to get back to a cozy tropics. එතකොට මෙහි සම්භාව්‍ය වෙලා වර්ධනය වෙනකොට සංඛ්‍යා වැඩි වෙනවා, පහසුකම් සඳහා වෙන තැන් වලට ගමන් කරනවා. නමුත් එතනට ගියාට පස්සේ ටික කාලයක් යනකොට එතන සීතල වෙනවා, සීතලේ ඉන්න බැරි නිසා ආපහු සමකය වෙතට ගමන් කරනවා. මේ ක්‍රියාවලිය මේ නිහාරි ක්‍රියාවට සිදු වුණා කියලා. වෙන විදිහකට බැලුවොත් ඇයි මේ අය නිහාරන්න ඕන? Why should their birds migrate? One is of course obvious. There's plenty of food in the spring. ඍතුව වෙනස් වෙනකොට ඕන තරම් කණ්ඩ දේවල් තියෙනවා, because you know the spring is a huge flush of new things. අලුතෙන් ඇති වෙන දේවල් තමයි ඒ ඍතුවට ලැබෙන්නේ. වසන්තයේදී ඔක්කොම තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ හින්දා කුරුල්ලොන්ට කණ්ඩ බොණ්ඩ වල අඩුවක් එහෙම තියෙන්න නොහැකි. So කෑම ඕන තරම් තියෙන නිසා, because there's enough amount of food, the birds are migrating. The second is to avoid the cold, obviously. සීතලෙන් ඈත් වෙන්න. The third is another very interesting factor, is to decrease risk of predation on juveniles. Pattern mata විලෝපිතික ක්‍රියාවලියේ පීඩනය අඩු කිරීම. Now why does it happen? The number of predators, when you look at the equator and those in the temperate areas of north and south, you find there is very much less. There are less to almost zero reptiles as you go up or go down. There are less to almost zero bird predators or mammal predators as you go up. So you can see that the predatory group විලෝපිතක කණ්ඩායම පොදුවේ හැම සත්ත්ව කොටසකම ද්‍රව දෙසට ගමන් කරනකොට when you go towards the poles decreases, and that's positive there. මොකද when the chicks are being brought up, පැටවු හදා වඩා ගන්නා කාලේ ඒ පැටවුන්ට පියාඹන්න බෑ බොහොම සමහර විට දුවන්න පුළුවන් වුණත් they become very vulnerable, and therefore the absence or the reduction of predators helps them to be brought up in protective atmosphere. ආරක්ෂක පරිසරයක හදා වඩා ගන්නට අවකාශ ලැබෙනවා. That is what is meant by it. So obvious things like this we know. විශාල උෂ්ණත්ව වෙනසක් තියෙනවා. ආහාර ලබා දීමට තියෙන කාලයත් ඒ අනුව වෙනස් වෙනවා කියලා අපි දන්නවා. The amount of time available for feeding the chicks or to feed for oneself changes from the tropics to the temperate poles. As you go up during half the year, අවුරුද්ද භාගයකින් උතුරු අර්ධද්වීපයේ හෝ දකුණු අර්ධද්වීපයේ ආලෝක ප්‍රමාණය, the amount of light that is available is higher than that of the tropics. In the tropics, we have 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness on the average. But as you go to the north, during half of the year, you can have in the North Pole 24 hours of light. So you therefore have a gradient coming down to 12. So the amount of light available is high. Now, because of this, මේ නිසා මේ ආලෝක රාශිය වෙනස නිසා ආහාර ලබා දීමට තියෙන කාලයත් වෙනස් වෙනවා. The time available for feeding also changes. So when you have to bring up babies, especially තමන්ට විතරක් නෙවෙයි පැටවුන් හදා වඩා ගන්නා කාලෙක පැටවුන්ගේ වැඩේම කණ එකනේ. හැම වෙලේම කණ්ඩ දෙන්න ඕන හැදෙන්න. ඉතින් එහෙම කරනකොට කොච්චර කණ්ඩ දෙන්න? How much must you feed them? And if you don't have that food during that time, the time is available, the food is available, then you can bring up the chicks very, very fast. And why? Especially because when they are growing up, very soon the temperature is going to change and it's going to get cold, and they must have the strength to fly away from being killed by the weather. You must have time at your hand. That is what you see here. Feeding for breeding, robbing 15 worms per hour, right? Flickers, 3,000 ants per day for the young, and so on. So mewage samara data is available. So if you look at the land area itself, it makes a huge difference. This is the equator. Samake binduwa. උතුරු පළාතේ 70%ක් තියෙනවා භූමිය. දකුණු පළාත දකුණේ තියෙන්නේ 30ක් විතරයි කියලා කියනවා. That's the rough area. Southern hemisphere 1/10 of land, 3/4 of the land is available above. So there should be a lot of birds on top compared to down. Land birds, yes, but sea birds, no. So main season in Sri Lanka is now just started. The birds would have started coming in end of August. So September, October is the most peak months, October basically. And then they all go back in March, and by April it's all gone. So they come to Sri Lanka only to feed. We don't have breeding migrants recorded as yet. Amat apita suhandena nihariyan hadunagena naha. That is for the future. They are all having bidirectional movement and so on. So because of that, we can have different types of migrations, common north, south, පොදුවේ අපි මේ මෙච්චර වෙලා මම explain කරුවේ, we explain so much migrants going to the north and coming down. This is the common one, and we say that that happens because of the winter. සීත ඍතුව නිසා මේක වෙන්නේ කියන එක. ඒ හින්දා සීත ඍතුව උතුරේ තියෙනකොට සමකේ දේශයටත් සීත ඍතුව දකුණු අර්ධද්වීපය ඇති වෙනකොට නැවතත් උතුරට සමකේ වෙතටත් උරුල්ල යනවා. So birds from in the south, when the winter occurs in the south, like they will flush upwards to the equator. Those in the north, they will flush down, move down into the equator. But because we saw that the huge land area is more on the north, we experience a lot from north coming down. Then there are other migrations. So these are all the routes that brings the birds from the north down to the south. Flyways, and then sorry here, and this is from the south going upwards when the winter is in the south. So both sides it's happening. But there are these birds which sometimes don't do that also, as you can see in this very picture. It's not very clear. So the yellow one is the breeding area of the common tern. We said the long distance migrant, and the blue area is where they will feed during the winter. That is when it is cold up here. Despite all of this, you can see resident කියලා තියෙනවා. The inner, there is a population somewhere here in Africa, and there's a population here. මෙතන ගහන දෙකක් ඉන්නවා. බොහොම කුඩා ගහන දෙකක් මේ ස්ථාන දෙකේ, අප්‍රිකාවේ ගැම්බියා මෙන්න මේ ස්ථානයේ, මේ හරිය බොලිවියා ඒ වගේ ස්ථාන. It's difficult to explain why they are there. Probably they have evolved. අපි කියන්නේ එකයි, ඒගොල්ලෝ පරිණාමය වෙලා ප්‍රශස්තය optimal conditions වලට, and so therefore they are there. So then you have time periods. මේ එක එක වචන පාවිච්චි කරනවා. I am very averse to these types of words. මේ වචන මේ විදිහට පාවිච්චි කරනකොට it's a little confusing. දැන් අපි ලංකාවේ කියනවා summer visitors කියලා. අපේ ඇති summer එකක් නැහැ. We don't have a summer here, but we are using these words because we inherit this from the British, and that is it. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ජූනි ජූලි අගෝස්තු කාලේ මේ කුරුල්ලා roseate terns, and there are other birds which seems to go across the country, move across during that times because of changes that are happening in the global, and because they go during that time of the year, and at that time it is summer up there, end of July, August, so we call it summer, and we call them summer migrants or summer visitors. මොකද එහෙ summer එක තියෙන කාලේ, ඒ කියන්නේ when the summer is up in the north, the birds are crossing Sri Lanka, and of course you know that much of the bird information, literature, and all of this is due to the Britishers or Europeans, let's call it. හරි, යුරෝපීය ජාතිකයන් නිසා තමයි මේ වුනේ. ඉතින් ඒගොල්ලෝගේ වචන වලින් ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් අපිට මේවා තේරුම් කරලා දෙන එක වුණා. දැන් කාලේ පොඩ්ඩක් වෙනස් වෙනවා, so we must also try to but in very recent years, in 10, 15 or 20 years ago, there was recognition that the migration is not just only north south. There is also east west. නැගෙනහිර බස්නාහිර හෝ බස්නාහිර නැගෙනහිරටත් නිහරියන් ගමන් කරන බවක් තොරතුරු වලින් හම්බුණා. And one of the birds that have been studied quite well is the pied crested cuckoo, which you saw in the picture here. දැන් මෙතන ඉන්න මේ කුරුල්ලා ගෝමර සිංහල වචනය තමයි pied crested cuckoo seems to be going east west, not exactly east west. ඒ කියන්නේ ඍජුවම නැගෙනහිර බස්නාහිර නෙවෙයි, නමුත් යම්කිසි රැල්ලක් හැටියට මෙහෙ ඉඳලා මෙහාට එන්නේ නැතුව මෙහෙම හරහාට යන ගතියක් තියෙන බවට මේ දත්ත වලින් දැන් තහවුරු වෙලා තියෙනවා. So we consider it as a east west migrator. Similarly, you have the Nuami kestrel, which goes all the way from one corner here, Nagaland haraha මෙහෙම අප්‍රිකාවට ගිහිල්ලා එන ශාරිකාවෙක්, the Nuam kestrel does that. So those are, and there's a fantastic video on the situation of conservation change that has happened because of this. And very recently, you can see 2019, 20th October, tagged bird, radio tagged bird went in this very interesting way. It came, it was tagged somewhere here, then it came that way, went this way, and So it was tagged somewhere in Australia. It came across India, all that, and ended up in Sri Lanka. And then it went missing. This oriental prating coal went missing. Many months later, it suddenly seems that it was back again here. And this purple line is what it went back up to that place. And after that, we don't have any record, but that is it. Did it come back like that, or did it go back like that? We have no idea yet. They have not published anything on that. So satellite tagging has brought new light into some of the activities that are happening. We know Mr. Rex De Silva studied extensively for a long time and established the fact that there is coastal migration of seabirds, which is now being followed by numerous persons. So we have to realize that the primary work on coastal migrations of especially bridal tern for more than 13 years, I think he sat on the beach and looked out in the sea 3-4 days a week to identify this. So a lot of commitment. The sad thing is it is difficult for us to find people like that today. And therefore we don't have the opportunity of continuing to monitor it, though there is some monitoring, not extensive, but some monitoring happening. So June, November, the birds are moving down. We then have something called passage migrants also. හරහා යනවා කියන එකක් අදහස් කරන්නේ බොහොම කෙටි කාලයකට ඉඳලා ඊට පස්සේ යනවා. සමහර වෙලාවට we call it staging points කියලා නැත්නම් staging migrations. එක් තැනකට පොඩ්ඩක් පොඩි නවාතනක් අරගෙන යනවා. They stay for a short period and they go. So such are called passage migrants. There are examples of partial migrants also. When we say partial, ඒ කියන්නේ අඩක් කියන එක කොටසක් විතරයි ගහණයෙන් නිහරෙන්නේ. අනිත් කොටස ඉන්නවා. ඒ කියන්නේ half, I don't know, I wouldn't say half, but a proportion of the population does not migrate, they stray. But I have not found in the literature whether they are the very same birds every year round or whether they are a mixture of these. It will be an interesting study to seek to find whether the part that migrates is a given stock of generations and not a mixture. Anyway, there is this partial migration. එතකොට මේ කොළ පාට ඉන්න අයගෙන් ඔක්කොම යන්නේ කොටසක් දකුණු ඇමරිකාවට ගිහිල්ලා ආපහු. Within winter, from time to time, there have been huge movements of organisms. I call it organisms because there is evidence of this type of movement even in mammals like the lemmings. Huge numbers now, 1863, 1888, 1908, and so on, it goes. And then similarly, snowy owl, long numbers, where a huge number of birds move in one direction. This is very much linked with the small mammal population changes also, where there is a boost, there's an increment of the bird population and also the movement. These are called sporadic, natang akhanda. There is the reasons are of course given because of the sudden burst of the food availability, response to that, the numbers of predators increase and so on and so forth. In the process of migration, there have been some very interesting records of some, the birds do molt. සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම නවීන කරගන්නවා වසරක් ඇතුළත දෙවරක් හෝ වසරක් එක වතාවකට හෝ දෙවරක් they new it. දෙවරක් කියන්නේ දැන් the bird that is migrating refreshes the feathers twice. One when leaving, the other when they are leaving back to breed. So, but those who are in the tropics, ගර්භකලාපයේ ඉන්න අය එක වතාවක් තමයි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් සිදුවෙන්නේ. සුවඳීමට කලින් සිදු කරගෙන ඊට පස්සේ ඊළඟ සුවඳීමේ කාලය එනතෙක් ඒ කට්ටලෙන් ඉන්නේ. අර නිහරණ කුරුල්ලන්ට සුවඳීම ඉවර වෙලා යවන්න අවශ්‍ය නිසා එක කට්ටලයකුත් නිහරි කාලයේ ඉන්නකොට ඒ කට්ටලේ හරවලා ආපහු සුවඳි කට්ටලයකට යන්නත් වෙන නිසා දෙවතාවක් එහාට අපි මූව් කරනවා. So here what is happening is that the birds leave here and they stop over at a point to molt. So it's a very interesting feature. The birds are given here as throated flycatcher, wobbling vireo, and so on, a westanager, and so on. Right. Now we were thinking only of the changes between north-south, longitudinal migrations, north-south, but we know that even in Sri Lanka, the studies were done by Nazima and then by Sriyani Wickramasinghe, Dr. Sriyani Wickramasinghe from Rajarata. They did their studies at the Knuckles range and established the fact that there is a altitudinal movement of birds, which we can very much talk of as a migrant movement. නිහාරි ගමනක් හැටියට අපිට සලකන්න පුළුවන්. නමුත් මේක රට ඇතුලේ වෙන නිසා රටවල් දෙකක් අතර මේක වෙන්නේ නැති නිසා කියලා සමහර තර්ක කෙරුවොත් ඒක වෙනස් වෙනවා. නමුත් අපි රටවල් දෙකක් ගැන අතර ස්ථාන දෙකක් ගැන විසක් අපි රටවල් දෙකක් ගැන කතා කරුවේ නෑ. We didn't talk about two countries. We are talking of migration between two locations. Breeding, feeding. Now in Sri Lanka, it has been found, evidence was found by two researchers that there is altitudinal migration, very specifically in the Knuckles range because of the changes in the weather and the wind coming in. But this is not something that had not been thought of in the past. We have had some very strange records of birds in Colombo and around, and we had been thinking that they were probably migrating for whatever reason. And then some of these things have been established, like the Sri Lanka wood pigeon, for example. It is known to come down to almost 100 meters elevation from the coast, from the hill country, though we say it is the hill country is their general residence. Samanin inne Sri Lanka ve Mailagoya, inne Kandukore Unata, meter Siak Palea, Samahara Varta Tino, coastal zone, you can verla asanne Varta Tino. May inne Viseshenma. අපි දැන් දන්න තරමට from what we know for the moment, they are coming because of a very special fruit, බෝම්බු කියන පළතුරු ආහාර ගැනීම සඳහා තමයි පල්ලෙහාට එන්නේ කියලා අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා. So it's probably a migration, probably, or we should be calling it a migration based on not weather, climate or anything, but based on food availability up there in the hills and down here in the plains. So these are some similar Knuckles, I must complete the story of Knuckles. It is very much because we have Kachan, that is the dry wind that picks up during May, June, July, August. And with that very strong wind that goes across the Knuckles, if you have been to Knuckles, it's almost near impossible to stay up there for a bird to fly around. So they come down to the low-lying areas where they are protected from the wind, into the basin, and then they move back up. So this has been recorded. Avat venats gaman tiyena movements, ahambu wela ena deval, accidental movements. These are not, sometimes people want to call them migrations, but I don't. They are accidental because of the changes in the climatic conditions that happen in the ocean. These fellows get pushed into the land and we have them. Some in Europe and places like that, there have been huge movements of birds which are called nomadic movements, like the earlier one of bird movements that we saw. Then ahambu lesa ayale yana aya bohomayak Lankawe pihidima nisama bodabimata ena අවස්ථා තියෙනවා vagrants ayale යනවා කියලා අපි කියන්නේ. Then භූමිය තුල පොඩි පොඩි එහාට මෙහාට ජීවීන්ගේ වෙනස්කම් සිදු වෙනවා කියලා අපි දන්නවා. There are records of distributional variations in terms of local shifts yet to be established. These are not migrations. These are just some things. Now, do we have some knowledge about the behaviors? A little bit I can comment on, not much detail. When do they migrate? Most of the birds migrate during daytime, though we first thought that most of the birds migrate during the night. If you look at overall, there's something like 50-50 or a little more heavier during the daytime than in the night. because finding your way is not easy in the night. තමන් යන මාර්ගය හොයා ගැනීම රැට තරම් ලේසි නෑ. ඒ නිසා බහුතරයක් කුරුල්ලෝ නිහැරන්නේ දවල් කාලෙට. එනමුත් එතන තියෙනවා යම් යම් වෙනස්කම්. රාත්‍රියට ගමන් කිරීම පහසුයි. මොකද උෂ්ණත්වය අඩු නිසා දේහ උෂ්ණත්වය, when the body temperature increases when you are flying and when the ambient temperature is low, it helps you to fly longer distances, which is what the larger birds are using. So most of the larger birds are flying during the night, are making use. In the same way, large birds that are very much economizing the flight and making use of ground conditions like upwelling, උඩට උෂ්ණත්වය නිසා ගමන් කරන අවස්ථාවලදී like the birds of prey, කොක්කු වගේ අය, cranes and things like that, to go over the Himalayas, they make use of the daytime, so not in the night. So you have a mixture, a lot. Typical migrants, geese, swans, divers, shorebirds, day and night, where powerful flyers, they are capable. Night migrants are small birds mostly small birds, because the energy that they dissipate from their body is very high and they can boil. අපේ භාෂාවෙන් කියනවනම් වාහනයක් boil කරනවා කියන්නේ ඒ වගේ you can boil and boom you will stop. So දේහය boil වෙන්නේ නැතිව යන්න නම් ඉතින් වායුව සිසිලන තියනක් හුඟක් හොඳයි කියලා කියනවා. So the birds is there. And feed him, because then they can feed during day and travel during night. These are some reasons. Benefits of protective cover are ආරක්ෂණය from predators. දිවා කාලේදී there are a lot of predators, so try to prevent it. Altitudinal migration, they can go over the Himalayas. You know, you will hear it from Dr. Sampath. වේගය විවිධ වේග තියෙනවා, but සාමාන්‍ය වේගයක් තමයි කුරුල්ලන්ට තියෙන්නේ. නිහැරෙනවායි කියලා just because they are migrating, they are not going to go faster or slower or anything. It's an average speed, but sometimes they can differ. But generally, they are around 15 to 55 miles per hour per day. So we said about the flyway routes, all of these, but just a message for the last little bit on Sri Lanka. Birds that we get are mostly from across the northern hemisphere. You can see all across from these areas we are getting birds, right? So right up here now, we will see from Dr. Prof. Sampath and Gayumu's work that this picture means nothing now, right? This is just a very quick glimpse of where the birds may be coming to Sri Lanka, right? Anyway, we have been identifying pathways from which the birds may be coming to Sri Lanka. රටට එන්නේ කොයි මම්පෙත් ඔස්සේද කියන එක, ඒ ඉඳ බටහිර මම්පෙත, නැගෙනහිර මම්පෙත සහ අන්දමාන් මම්පෙත කියන මේ තුන අපි හඳුනාගෙන තියෙනවා. මේවා එසේමද කියන ඒවා තමයි දැන් අපි මේ තවුරු කරන්න උත්සාහ කරන්නේ. එතනට යනවා. We are getting there very very slowly, closely, not at once but somewhat. Then we are seeing from where they enter the country. So Point Calimere, Comorin Point, and anywhere along this, between these two, Rameswaran and all of these points are where we think they are crossing. Definitely they cross this sea here, that we know, because of radar studies that were done for security needs during the war, towards the tail end of the war in 2007-2008. So we know that the birds definitely fly through, cross like that, and at very 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 low levels, almost like 1.5 meters above the water, in large numbers. And I think very recently there was a large number of birds that had died in the Mana area, and we think that also could have been as a result of one of these huge flocks that were moving together, were pushed away onto the ocean and killed or something like that. Anyway, these are still what we call anecdotal evidence-based pathways. Ahambu තොරතුරු මත, අහමුත් කියන්න බෑ, තොරතුරු මත පදනම් වූ සාක්ෂි කියලා තමයි අපි කියන්නේ. ඒ තොරතුරු එතරම්ම අපි කියන පැහැදීමක් නැහැ. එතරම්ම සත්‍යතාවයක් තියෙනවද නැද්ද කියන එක විශ්වාසවන්තභාවය ඉතාමත්ම අඩුයි. ඒවට තමයි අපි කියන්නේ anecdotal evidence කියලා. රට ඇතුළෙත් how they move or maybe colonize the different parts, we know they are mostly probably using the geological features that are available. For example, the waders will be going along the coastline, along using from one lagoon to another lagoon to another lagoon and filling up at the end. Because we know that they come to the north and there are large numbers in the north, and then they go missing, either going away or coming in, and then we see them filling in over. So if we can do this watch during the watch and have all this data over the years, it will give us some idea. So we have migration across the country. They distribute, mostly the forest birds will go into the middle of the country or lower. The coastal line is the best for the waders, and the ducks are in this area because we have a lot of water bodies here in the northwestern province and the north, lot of ducks, less ducks down south and all that, but huge numbers up here, Noana, and then all the way up kites and places like that. So how many? 40% of our birds are migratory. In the groups of waders, කියන්නේ අනුතීර චාරීන් කියලා වතුර සහ ගොඩබිම අතර ඉන්න කුරුල්ලන් 100%ක්ම වගේ අපි දෙතුන් දෙනෙක් අපි දන්නවා they are breeding so and දෙනවා ලංකාවේ but if you take a overall picture almost like 100% of waders are migrants 95ක් විතර of the ducks and predators around 65 and about 30% of the forest birds. There have been some which are unknown or doubtful. සැකසහිතයි කියලා කියනවා even the Indian pond heron, cattle egret, black-winged stilt, these are all still on the list of unknown, but someday we hope. We have been doing a lot of ringing on the lines of trying to understand this movement and things like that since 1972. Flocks have been studied, but FOG has been doing a lot of bird studies. There was one study that was done in 1963-68, which is very interesting because it is something related to like the pandemic at this present. Viruses were used in the war in the Viet Cong time. And they suspected that arboviruses, කියන්නේ වායුවේ ගමන් කරන virus තියනවද නැද්ද කියලා හොයාගන්න අවශ්‍යයි කියන එක යටතේ අග්නිදිග ආසියාවේ they did a study and that study just spilled over into Sri Lanka, and so that was done by the WHO and American initiated army study. 300 forest wagtails, only one was recorded. We start work with our studies at Singaraja, and we have done a lot of things with Bombay Natural History Society assistance. We have established, at least for some birds that we have migrated, the phenomena of site tenacity. ඒ කියන්නේ ස්ථාන නිශ්චය කියන එක නැත්නම් තැනකට බැඳී ඇති කියන එක අපි තහවුරු කරලා තියෙනවා. I think we can broadly now say that all birds are site tenactic. ඒ කියන්නේ සියලුම කුරුල්ලන් ස්ථාන බන්දුතාවයන් පෙන්වනවා කියන එකට අපිට අද තහවුරු කරන්න පුළුවන්. ලැබී ඇති සාක්ෂි හැම කුරුල්ලටම නැති වුණත් ලැබී ඇති සාක්ෂි ප්‍රමාණවත් කියලා කියන්න පුළුවන්. I think it is good enough to say that site tenacity is a feature in all the birds across the country from the data that we have, even though we have not done it for every species. Migrants, we have got data. We have data from forest birds and all of them, and we know that this is a fact of matter. No? So these are some of those early records that were there from 84. You can see brown-breasted flycatcher in Singaraja, Almandia. Then we had the Indian blue robin, 2 years coming to the same place. Brown stripe. Some recoveries from India. There's quite a lot in the Indian picture. India has done a lot on recoveries based on rings. So common terns, you can see Point Calimere, and then we have it in Jaffna in 2 days. There are sandwich terns that was ringed in Astrakhan, that is near the Dead Sea, coming to culprit here in December of that year. Then this is a special situation. Ayale yanawa කියලා when vagrants, when they get pushed around due to the changes in the weather of sea, we had these sooty terns which came. We had 3 of them having about 13 birds were flown into land, all of them died. We had 3 rings, and from that we were able to identify where they came from. You can see some were from here, Juan, arid seashells, these Madagascar, some were from Seychelles, but they got washed off onto the coast here. So they may, and now we know that there is a pattern of movement across like that. So මේ වගේ දේවල් තහවුරු වෙනවා. Then we have Kentish flowers recaptures. Red shanks, we have recaptures in the same places. We had a very new bird inner ringing program for the first time where people have seen it, but nobody was believing it. But we had the wry neck on the capture. Then the white shake turn was also established using the ringing techniques. And then there are many issues with migration also, which we have to recognize. The principal one, which is the last slide, I'm not going to go beyond this last slide, which is the habitat loss and habitat degradation, not just the loss alone. We know we have somewhat reduced the loss of forest cover in this country compared to what it was 20-30 years ago. අවුරුදු 20ක් කලින් වන විනාශයට වඩා අඩු වුණත් අද තාමත් මේක වෙනවා. ඉතින් සෑහෙන ප්‍රමාණයක් අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා. හායනයත් ඒකට වැදගත් වෙනවා. Degradation, that is when you change. The forest still remains in some form, but it has changed. That is also a matter for migrants, because since they are very site tenacity, ස්ථාන බැඳීමක් මේ ආයත තියෙන නිසා ස්ථානයේ වෙනසක් ඇති වෙනකොට ඒක වනාන්තරයක්ම වෙන්න අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. තෙත් බිමක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්, උද්‍යානයක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්, your own home garden it can be. So you have to be a little more concerned about what you have around your house, and if you have migrants and you want the migrants to keep coming back into your area. The features in that area matter a lot to the migrants because they have this site tenacity attachment, and therefore when you make a change in the area, you're bound to lose the bird. So like for example, many of the Indian pittas, they love the underbrush areas. So if you get rid of the underbrush areas because there are going to be reptiles and serpents and things like that, you're definitely not going to have the nice beautiful pitta in your garden that came before. These are of course unavoidable sometimes. අපිට වෙනස් කරන්න බෑ. සමාගයේ ගෙවත්තේ පිරිසුදුව තබා ගැනීම අවශ්‍යයි. මොකද ගෙවත්තේ ඕනකට වඩා පොළ වර්ග තියෙනවා නම්, if there's more foliage, you have a chance of having dengue and other mosquito borne diseases, so you have to balance it. Buildings and lights are known to create a lot of problems because when the birds fly in, especially in the night, they hit the buildings with glasses. We have seen quite a lot of this evidence. Airports, we don't have specific losses from our airports, but there is quite a lot of records of bird strikes. කුරුල්ලන් සහ යාන අතර හැපුණු අවස්ථා දෙක තුනක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට වියදම් වැඩි ගානයි. නමුත් අවුරුදු ගානක් 1980 ගණන් වල ඉඳලා මේක යාමනය කරනවා. It's been monitored. I have been involved in studying it since 1994. In the last couple of years, I have not, because we have built the team inside the Bandaranaike International Airport and Matala, and the teams are monitoring these things. We don't have major strikes as yet, but there is a little concern sometimes. There are fancy pictures of large groups of waders on the tarmac in the nights and so on. In recent years, you know, we had gone for renewable energy, and with that the windmills have been a major concern for many people. But I must say that we have tackled the issues very carefully. We had a lot of very strong studies being done on how to, where to have the windmills, and even change the number of windmills and so on and so forth. We have radar systems installed to try and prevent it. But despite all of those preventive actions and things like that that have come into the picture, the fact of the matter globally, we are finding that the birds are also adjusting themselves, and the issue of where the windmills are going to be to produce the large amount of energy that is required is shifting from the land to the ocean. Not to say that there is no ocean bird problem, but in the oceans, like where there have been 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 windmills in the oceans, it has been shown that the alignment of the windmills make a huge difference on the impact on the birds. They learn to fly in between the windmills if the windmills are aligned in that proper way. So these are a lot of machine, lot of technology, all kinds of things are coming in. And of course, I don't know whether you're aware that the future windmill is not the horizontal windmill for energy generation. It is going to be what is referred to as vertical windmills, And when the vertical windmill technology comes into the picture, the arguments of bird strikes on the windmill blade is no longer going to be an issue. It can only be a suction issue, if at all, and that is very, very preventive and not an issue at all in that sense. But let us see. But these are all. The renewables are here. You know that these days, hariyata climate change kana kata karana මොකද එන මාස වෙනකොට there's a huge conference in Glasgow. All countries are committed to go to renewables. We are committed to shift to 70% of renewables by 2030, 2050. We are not going to change that, definitely, because the world is not going to let us change it anyway. Tel, gas, renewables are going to be there. So birds and windmills are a little going to be a concern, but you can assure yourself it is not a major issue at all compared to what it was before. කලින් අපි මෝඩයෝ වගේ කරගත්ත දේවල් අද කරන්නේ නැති නිසා එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් බවට පරිවර්තන වෙලා නැහැ. So these are some flagging data that brought some interesting things. I won't go. This was an Australian bird that was recognized in Boondala by Chintaka and all that. So we have established all of these. So this is just to show you how the satellite tagging sort of brought a fancy story to the world many, many years ago. This blackwing stilt, sorry. This, now I forget the name of the bird was godwit, black-tip bar-tail godwit, had this fancy movement. You can see එකතැනක ඉඳලා කිලෝමීටර 10000ක් ගිහිල්ලා ඊට පස්සේ 6000ක් ගිහිල්ලා ඊට පස්සේ 11000ක් ගියා 17th March to 24th March, 30th August to 7th September. දින 7කින් කිලෝමීටර 11000ක් මෙතන 8 දවස් 7-8කින් කිලෝමීටර 10ක්. ඉතින් මේ වගේ අඛණ්ඩව පියාසර කරන්න පුළුවන්ද? Can a bird fly like this? පාර හොයාගන්නේ කොහමද? We know most of the time this is navigation, not migration. I will not take more time. I have taken a lot of time. This is navigation. Very quickly, they use magnet. Today we are confirming that they have a biomagnetic system in their body which enables them in the beak, the base of the beak actually, they say, and that enables them to use the geomagnetic area for sensitivity to go. They are using the stars. රැට ගමන් කරන අය තරු පාවිච්චි කරනවා. ඒ හින්දා අඳුරු දිනවල් වල නිහරි කුරුල්ලන් අඩුයි. There's less migrants in gloomy days of the nights. This is a well-known fact. So the navigational strategies are piloting, using landmarks to locate where it is and go towards that. Path integration කියලා කියන computer network ඒ වගේ නිකන් ඇතුලේ කුරුල්ලන්ගේ තියෙනවා කියලා අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා ඒවා. කොම්පස් එක පාවිච්චි කරනවා කිව්වේ ඒකයි. දැන් කොම්පස් එක හැටියට ගත්තොත් භූගෝලීය කොම්පස් එකේ චුම්බක කොම්පස් එක ඒ වගේම stars or තාරකාත් ඒ සඳහා යොදා ගන්නවා. ඒ නිසා ඒ වගේ නිශ්චිත පැහැදිලි ගමන් මාර්ග හඳුනාගෙන තියෙනවා. So this is Starlink uses the compass, and these ones are known to be using different things. A lot of tests have been done and shown that the night at a planetarium will exercise කරලා ආරෝමය කරලා තියෙනවා. So compass එකකට පාවිච්චි කරන solar ඒ කියන්නේ polarized light කියලා දෙයක් තියෙනවා. They are using that. Then the time changes of the clock and all of that. Stars definitely, as I said, and then the geometric field. We have a lot of issues with different places also. We have things. I will stop with this, and I hope Dr. Sampath can be contacted, because in the last couple of years, in the last 3 years, we have done some real good work with Gayomi and Professor Sampath at Mana, with the courtesy of Mr. Nyanam, who has helped us a lot in this process to get where we want, and of course the Chinese Academy of Sciences for providing us the satellite. So I will leave it for them to just say something about this current. It won't be long as what I have talked to you, a very short presentation of what has been new in the last couple of. We have kept you all updated, but Professor Sampath and Gayomi will further update you on the very, very recent situations, and then we can go in for a discussion, time permitting. So thank you very much. Please count the birds. Please watch the migrants for us and enter them in the eBird. We are strongly promoting the eBird for record keeping. Thank you very much. Malaka, we can contact.
Yes, Sampath is
Right. Okay. Then he can.
Dr. Sampath.
Yeah. He can start off.
Okay. Malaka, shall we get the Anessa? Can we get the slides off? Good morning, everybody. Sorry that I'm in the field. I'm on my way to Belihullo and I stopped at kind of a roadside spot actually at Silver A. I will just give you a very short update considering it's already 10:40. Malaka, can we get the slides off?
Sorry?
Sir, can we get the, so I can share? Yeah, I will share my screen for a quick second. I will spend only 5 minutes. I have about 20 slides, but I'm not going to discuss any of this, considering that basically we passed basically the critical time of today's meeting. But what we'll do, we have something I think a spectacular finding and reporting to do. අපි පහුගිය අවුරුදු දැන් 4ක් විතර මේ ලංකාවේ සහ මේ ජාත්‍යන්තර මට්ටමින් අපි ඩෙවලොප් කරගත්තු මේ සම්බන්ධතා සහ මේ විද්‍යාත්මක කොලැබොරේෂන්ස් එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ තහවුරු කරගත්තු මේ ජාලයක් හරහා අපි මේ පහුගිය අවුරුදු මේ පොග්ගැසෙල් එක පහුගිය අවුරුදු 4ක් අපි වැඩ කරා මේ චන්ද්‍රිකා තාක්ෂණ කේත භාවිතයෙන් පක්ෂීන්ව මේ ගේ පර්යටනික මාර්ග සහ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ මේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාව කොහොමද ලෝකයේ මේ පක්ෂී පර්යටනය සම්බන්ධයෙන් කොහොමද අපේ තැන මොකක්ද කියලා විද්‍යාත්මක පරීක්ෂණයක් කරන්න. We have been working through for the past 4 years through an international collaborative network to understand the actual migratory routes and the Sri Lanka's position in the global flyways. So, like today, I thought to present one of the probably the most one of our key breakthroughs in that those studies. But in the context of the time, I will just give you a small teaser, and we will have our migratory bird day, World Migratory Bird Day on the 9th October. We will have a special presentation on an elaboration of this particular finding on our POGSLSA Chinese Academy of Sciences, this joint venture of satellite tagging program, the latest updates and some of the key breakthroughs that we had over the past few months. So as Sir mentioned, so Dayamini Panagoda, our research assistant and the PhD candidate, is part of her research, postgraduate research work, as well as Jude Janit Niroshan, who is working on the Hanuman flow and related work, and then so myself and several others involved. So just to give you a very quick update, we tagged a brown-headed gull last year in Mana just before they leave. They were in full breeding plumage. It was in April, 4th April, just before New Year. That was our last tagged bird of the season. We had 35 tags to be deployed during the last season, and this particular bird was the last bird that we tagged, and it crossed, it flew over Himalayas. there are so far only 3 species known to fly over Himalayas, and all of them are over 1.5 to 2 kilos or more, and our bird is only 500 grams. So this will be the smallest known case, the most smallest species in terms of weight. And also, I don't think anybody ever thought that a species like this, a brown-headed gull, would do such a extraordinary feat. We will have a presentation on that soon, but I will give you a small teaser. This is Himalayas. It's the towering, basically the roof of the planet, 30,000 feet up. It's the cruising altitude of a Boeing 747. Very few species can fly over because of the very harsh winds, B, the very low oxygen pressure. Oxygen මට්ටම ඉතාමත් අඩුයි අඩි 30000ක් වෙනකොට අඩි 30000කින් තමයි විශාල ඔය මේ මගී ගුවන් යානා මේ පියාඹන්නේ. ඒ මගී ගුවන් යානාවල නම් ඇතුලේ ප්‍රෙෂර් කරලා ඔක්සිජන් අපිට දෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් ඔක්සිජන් මදි. අපේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මුහුදු මට්ටමේ ඉන්න ජීවියෙක්ට එච්චර අඩි 30000ක් වගේ උසකදී මේ ශ්වසනය කරන්න බෑ. ඒ වගේම ඉතාම අධික හුලං තියෙනවා. ඔය දෙක මගහරවන්න සහ සීතල ඔය තුන මගහරව ගන්න ගොඩක් සතුන්ට බෑ. අපි දන්න තරමින් මේ මෙතෙක් පක්ෂ විශේෂ තුනයි ඒ වැඩේ කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙලා තිබුණා. ඒතකොට Central Asian Flyway goes right like it's like this the Himalaya sits right in the middle of the Central Asian Flyway. So because of that the birds that migrate along the flyway has to go from either side of the Himalayas. They either go from the eastern Himalayas, where Assam, Bangladesh, and come into the South in Asia, or they fly from Afghanistan, Pakistan, that side, Jammu Kashmir, and then fly into the subcontinent from the western foothills. The bar-headed goose, the very famous species, it is famous because of this extraordinary migration over Himalayas. For a long time period, bar-headed goose was the only species known to fly over Himalayas, or the only species that could fly over 20,000 feet up and fly through these treacherous mountain peaks and enter into the South Asia. Later, recently, through satellite tagging, there was one population of demersal cranes, which is a very pretty bird, somewhat like a open bill in terms of its appearance. Also used to fly, and there were some anecdotal evidences, and eventually satellite tagging programs conducted in northern China had shown that some of these birds fly over Himalayas. And the very charismatic large steppe eagle. It is slightly bigger than the greater spotted eagle that's been seen in Sri Lanka lately. So that one actually uses the mountain peaks for foraging, and later some studies showed that they actually crisscross the mountain in the process. So, okay, I will take only another 2-3 minutes. So the brown-headed gull that we tagged in Mannar, it spent fair bit of time in Mannar. As you can see that these are tagged like satellite tag data within the month of early April, and you can see that it flies along the southern shore. This is where the windmills are, and we have this sort of data across Mannar now. So we can show that the impact of windmills in the future, because these were done without the proper scientific scrutiny, in my opinion. So now we have that data to show that. And so this one, Lahiru Walpita, who works in Mannar, a great birder and a keen eye, he spotted some of our flagged brown-headed gulls while it was flying along the southern shore last year. That was in mid-April. And then our bird flew from Mannar all the way to Nepal and flew over Himalayas. In doing that, it basically crosses the great Himalayan range and enter into its breeding grounds in the Tibetan plateau. Amazingly, this 500-gram bird flew over 22,000 feet up through the mountains, and in the process, it crosses a valley which is about 18,000 feet up. Remember, Pidurtalagala is 8,000 feet. So it flew about twice or slightly more a mountain that is twice the taller than the Pidurtalagala. Snow-capped and probably very windy, and it flew through a valley. And so this is the data showing that it climbed, and eventually from 20,000 foot elevation, it crosses the Himalayas. And then it stays there because then after it's the high altitude plateaus, very dry, wetlands, mostly consisted of molten glaciers, and so the water that produced by these melted glaciers provides the breeding grounds, the wetlands in the high altitude. And then it passes this particular valley, as I mentioned, about 5,500 feet up, and enter into these wetlands. And this is where I bred. With that, I think I will stop because this time it's already about 20 minutes past. We will discuss this. We will have a special presentation on this finding. This is the 4th known case of a bird flew over such a high altitude and crossing Himalayas. So over to you, Malaka. I think I will stop. Sorry, I'm in the field, so it's the reception might be a bit noisy, and the lighting is not ideal. But there's a great scenes out over there. That's the Central Highlands in the horizon. All right, over to you, Malaka.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sampath. That's very interesting. So we will have the 9th of October is World Migratory Bird Day. So we'll be having a special session on 9th of October, which will be a Saturday from 9 to 11, and you will be able to get to know more about these movements of satellite tagged birds. So I think we'll let.
Any questions?
If there are any questions, yeah.
Yeah, there were some small questions by Shami, I think, about on the chat box. He has said, seeing pelicans in Colombo. Pelicans are residential in Colombo, so they are around all the time. They are breeding here. If you go towards Town Hall, Park Road, and in that area, they are breeding on those things. And sometimes messy, but they are breeding. Then you have asked something about average speed. Yes, they do fly throughout the night sometimes. And maybe sometimes some birds don't, some birds do. So there's a mix. When I showed you that Bartel Godwit slide, I think you would have recognized that. He's asking another question about small birds. How do they get energy? They pack up all the energy. You know, the tissues, there's a huge weight gain before the birds migrate, which is shown to be on the deposition of high energy fat in the body, which they burn while they fly. So they do have physiological adaptations for those purposes. If there are any other questions, yes, please do ask. Otherwise,
කුරුල්ලෝ වතුර සපයා ගන්න පුළුවන් කොහොමද?
This is, well, the birds normally don't, we said, drink water like we drink, but they drink some water. But most of the water that a bird needs is through its own food, right? So if they need the water, they will. So that's why I said once in the migratory physiology, නිහාරි කුරුල්ලන් වතුර ගැනීම සුවිශේෂීව වතුර සඳහාම කියලා නෑ. මොකද කුරුල්ලෝ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඒගොල්ලෝගේ වතුර ආහාර වලින් තමයි ගන්නෙ. අමතර වතුර ටිකක් හැටියට ඔය තියෙන තැනකින් වතුර ටිකක් බොනවා මිසක් නැත්නම් වතුර බීම සඳහා අපි වගේ අනිවාර්ය අවශ්‍යතාවයක් කුරුල්ලන්ට නැහැ. කෑම වලින් තමයි ගන්නෙ. නමුත් දැන් නිහාරියනකොට ඔය කෑම ගන්නත් තියෙන අවස්ථා අඩුයිනේ. The places where they can get food becomes also limited. During that time, that is why the fat store becomes very important. All the migrant birds stock a lot of fat on their body before they migrate. So the fat is the one that provides the food that they want, and that provides the water requirement also on the way. And of course, if there is a point of stop and there is water, they will use it.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, Vimal.
Yeah. No, it was very clear. Thank you, Professor, for your explanations. During my long years of bird watching, I have been wondering how, now certain birds are resident birds, certain birds are migratory birds. Let's say you can't label and keep them in their status as resident or migrant, fine. But some resident birds in the process of their evolution tend to be migrant. Am I clear?
Yeah, some of them can, but not in our lifetime. So that's let me put it the other way around. Let me put it the other way around for you.
Professor, what I mean is, it has been, the evolutionary process has taken place all along. During our lifetime, the transitory thing could happen, is it?
Yeah, that's what. Right. Let me put it to you in a different way now. I spoke to you about the blue-tail bee-eater now.
You did.
That is where during our lifetime, the blue-tail bee-eater was basically considered a migrant.
Yeah.
Till the first birds were recognized in Panama. That was in the 60s, if I can record. Basically, think of 63, 64, somewhere in that time. I think Shirley Pereira was the first person to spot blue-tail bee-eaters during the non-migrant time. So now that led to a little bit of a concern, and then the thought started, is it something that has said to the bee that the birds have not migrated and they are staying, and is it they are a resident? And gradually we recognize the breeding ground. When I said 99%, the last record of what we have about this interesting situation is that young were seen to be fed by the adults. Right, at Panama, close to Panama, young were fed by adults. Now that can mean two things. One, that the young came with the adults and then they were feeding. That may or may not have bred in country. So that's 99%. We need to confirm that 1%. Many have recorded nest falls at Panama.
Okay.
Now, what I would say is that we would venture out very soon when things are fine, use long stethoscope sort of thing. Now we have the gadgets now, like the
sure.
You can send it into the body. So if we do something like that and establish that there are eggs and the chicks are being looked after, the last 1% will be confirmed.
Sure.
So answering your question, now we have started seeing this only after 1963.
Sure.
Was it there before 1963?
Nobody knows.
Don't know.
Thank you. Clear.
Have or may not be. So it could have been a very, very big, long story. And you know, Kumana was the most accessible place in the country for a long time.
Oh,
so
yes.
May have been there long before our times, or it may be something that is happening now. But on the books, it is as if it is happening during our time.
Thank you. Very clear. Thank you.
Would I be clear that way?
Very clear. Thank you.
Right, Malaka, then we will conclude for the day. Then,
Yeah, and so we also we put the registration form and we include a question to mark who are the common migratory birds that
great.
each had seen around their garden during the past, basically. So these are the response. So so a lot of people put 42 responded that Asian paradise flycatcher had seen in their gardens and around, and then comes the bee eater, and then Indian pita had been seen in gardens of 47.5 people who responded, and then barn swallows, forest wagtails, brown shrike, they have been seen. So these are the this is the chart that show the responses. So keep
one more thing, just Malaka, before we close. Now, 9th of October, can we ensure that we have everybody? So I think you should have to inform all our members and through Facebook and things like that. Can you also inform the bird life and people like that? Because when Sampath is going to present something that is very science, I think we should make across the world.
Yes, that's in our mind actually. Right. Perhaps we could invite the Chinese Academy of Science also to be part of that. Yeah.
And so you'll have to organize the time, huh?
Yeah, maybe. Okay. The time constraint.
Now it is sleeping time for some people.
Yeah, that's true.
People are just getting up, so please think about it and put the best time.
Okay, so the time could be different. Initially, I thought it will have the same time slot, but yes,
no. We must target very much the Western people. You know, they are the ones who we can't do anything. No?
Right. Okay. We'll inform the time later. So stay tuned to the Facebook and other channels. We'll communicate you. We'll communicate others. Yeah. Okay.
So then we will conclude for the day. Thank you very much for having participated. Please keep the 9th October free. Malaka will inform the time, because that is going to be some very, very new information for all the birders. So stay safe. We are hoping that things will change fast and quickly within the month of October. But always remember, social distancing, safety is going to be prime. And within those frameworks, we will try to revive our activities with the young kids and the adults all together. So thank you very much once again. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.